when I'm talking to kind of other founders, like you might think you're all aligned, but like you need to really get down and like talk about what success looks like.
Welcome to Spotlight On, a podcast about how companies are built from the people doing the building, one messy, exhilarating decision at a time.
I'm your host, Vas Natarajan, one of the partners here at Accel, and so excited to have Joel Flory, one of the co-founders of VSCO, joining us today.
Thanks, Vas, for having me.
Joel, we are past, I think, the 10-year mark of Accel's original Series A investment in the business. So now that we are a decade in, it's probably as good a time as any to reflect back on the journey, the lessons, the learnings along the way, and also to maybe reflect on VSCO's role in the ecosystem right now, because it's a really interesting moment in creativity at large. We have Gen AI, we have so many different new competitors coming into the market. You know, the notion of creativity, I think, is being rewritten in many ways. And VSCO had an important role to play in creativity of past. And I think we have an incredibly important role to play in creativity of future. So excited to explore all of that with you and more. But maybe to start, walk us back to when you started the company. I mean, it was 4 of you in remind me, it was like a garage shed.
So 2010, and then forming the business 2011. I mean, initially we set out, it was a little more of a lifestyle business. I had an injury in my wrist from holding a camera for over a decade. It was really bad arthritis. And so I knew I needed something new. And it's not really marketable to be a wedding photographer for a decade to then go and try and get a job somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I need to start something. And so I got together a group of friends and I pitched a variety of different ideas. And we actually started 5 different businesses at the time. But I remember
Were the friends you pitched the current co-founders, or did you have different permutations with different friends?
Different permutations with different friends.
Okay.
So Greg Lutzi, who's co-founder of VSCO, he's designer, but honestly, like he is just like a true creative. And it's not like I don't want to say like I'm not a true creative, but like Greg draws all of his energy in life from creativity and exploring new avenues. And so Greg and I really embarked on VSCO. It was kind of the idea that seemed right with him. And it was one of those things where we met a need initially for ourselves. So Greg had built a website for me. People were wanting to have Greg do the same. And we're like, hey, let's build kind of photographer-specific or photo-specific websites, WordPress customizations for photographers. We started with the workshop for photographers. Yeah. It was kind of really our seed round, if you will. It was $1,500 a person. It's here in San Francisco. And we sold out in less than a week.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay.
How many people came to the original workshop?
45 people.
Okay.
Yeah. So 45 people came to the initial workshop, and it was really around how to run a photo business, which, not to kind of like jump forward, but like literally if there was ever a physical representation of where VSCO's going, it was really what that initial workshop was.
That's interesting.
I taught a class on how to market yourself and contracts. We talked about editing and the tools needed. We talked about building community. And there's all the things that someone needs today in order to run a successful business, and everything to kind of help a photographer make it.
Yeah.
And that's what we started with. We thought the first product was going to be these websites, but it turned out actually being Zach Hodges, who was part of the founding team. He built a tool to help me save time editing weddings so that I could spend less time on my weddings and more time on VSCO. Mm-hmm. And I literally remember the day. I plopped it into Lightroom. It was kind of a plug-in for Lightroom. I put it into Lightroom, Portrait 800, and there are these custom camera raw profiles. And it was kind of this like, oh my gosh. It was like one click, wow. And
because to get to that level of finish on a photo before you had this plugin, how long would that have taken?
I mean, so yeah, it's kind of like put it like, typically before this plugin, I would spend about 12 hours editing a wedding, and this took it down to about 6. It cut my time in half.
Yeah, okay.
after that launched a few more tools that really got that down to even 2 to 3. And so
these were all Photoshop plugins initially.
Photoshop and Lightroom plugins. Yeah.
And could you monetize those?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
So it was $119 a pack.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about actually like real software margins is 97% margin, digital download. And yeah, that was, that's what we launched with November 15th, 2011.
Wow.
But I thought it was going to be, we had 250 or so photographers that were asking us about these WordPress templates. We thought this would be a nice like supplemental income at that point. And, within 48 hours, we had over $250,000 in sales. And we're like blown away. And like everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
Like Gmail shut us down for sending too many emails and spam. Our credit card processor said it was fraud. Put all of the money that we made, ended up putting $750,000 into an escrow account that took 7 months to get access to.
Okay.
So we had to flip over to PayPal to take payment.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of like
This
a
was
start.
all trial by fire.
Trial by fire. But I think what we quickly realized is that we built something that gave photographers time back and allowed them to do what they loved. And that was spend more time capturing photos and being with friends and family and less time like individually tinkering everything in Lightroom. And we just met a need and it went from there. Launched mobile app that was a paid app in 2012 and then moved to a free app with in-app purchases and really a community in 2013. And that really kind of defined the era for the next like 4 years. And I think one of the biggest moments of like why VSCO is still here today, Brian Mason and like really pushing out subscription at VSCO in 2017. And I remember like thinking as like, we always wanted it to be perfect. And Brian was like, it needs to get out.
Yeah.
Like, and he really wanted to make sure that like we had that foundation and had to build off of it. And I think about the subscription in 2017 to really 2022 was just one SKU, one off, like, yearly. And now kind of where it is today with multiple tiers and offerings. And it's really expanded where there's really something for everyone.
So along that journey, we faced a number of different pivot points from a product standpoint. And maybe pivot points is the wrong way to describe it, but there were moments in which our community was telling us that they wanted something different than maybe we necessarily envisioned, or they were attracted to something, they were getting energy from a part of the product that we hadn't intended.
Yeah.
Talk about those moments and maybe what advice you have for new founders that are going 0 to 1, that are building that product, that are listening to their customers, navigating the tension between one's vision versus, the data that you're getting in from your end users.
I won't lie. It's probably the most difficult thing around growing a business. And I think very early on, it's easy because you don't have much and you can't do much. So you're really like focused and then you grow the business and now there's all these opportunities and the customer base is growing and you're trying to like really hone in on what that core customer base is. There's a few instances where we listened to our customers and we almost took it too literal and we didn't look far enough into the future. So VSCO Keys is a perfect example.
I don't even know what VSCO Keys is.
Yeah. Okay. So great. So back in the day, for Lightroom editing, there were these custom keyboards, physical keyboards that you would need to buy that were programmable. And we built a tool and these products were all $500 to $700. We built a tool, VSCO Keys, that we actually, for the first time ever, hacked Lightroom to be able to change your own keyboard. So you didn't need to buy a physical keyboard. You could map and change all the keys on your own keyboard into whatever you wanted them to do in Lightroom. And it was this huge feat. The team did it. It was amazing. It was a beautiful product. It worked really well. And literally within a span of 12 months, that market almost went completely away. And we ended up open sourcing VSCO keys. It was probably 2 years, 18 months worth of time and effort that in the end was not a part of our future. And I look back on it and it was like, we literally listened to exactly what people wanted and it didn't last. And I think that was like one of the challenges. Like you have, especially as a CEO, you have all of these inputs and noise coming in, and it's really listening and taking in the right inputs, taking in, the right pieces of advice and really thinking long-term about the vision and really staying focused on that vision. And I would actually say, like, not that we lost our way, but I would say our focus on that initial vision around professional and photographers and creatives, we've had some times where we're better at sticking to that than others. And I think that's one thing that Eric came in and really latched onto and doubled down, was kind of this refocus on the vision. And I would say, like, VSCO's current success is really based upon that principled approach towards, who our core customer is, what their needs are today, but really thinking about their career trajectory as they grow from an aspiring and hobbyist to a pro, and what they need along that journey. It's not easy. And different, different fields and different products are different, but especially in a consumer play, like if you read your App Store reviews or the Reddit channel and you chase those down, like sometimes it's a vocal minority. Sometimes there's a silent majority that is not telling you what it is, and you actually need to listen to that. And that's the job of the CEO.
Yeah, makes sense. So iPhone comes out 2007.
Yep.
And it's building an install base. It's getting more significant among your community. More importantly, the hardware is getting a lot better. So every iteration of the phone, they were advancing the capabilities of the underlying camera. And so when did you realize that mobile was going to be a much bigger opportunity than desktop?
In 2012, April 2012, we launched our first mobile app. But I would say even then, mobile photography was not a serious craft for photographers. Instagram was out, but professional photographers like myself, I didn't even have an Instagram account. The mobile photos looked gimmicky. They weren't quality. And it was a nice to have. We built it to drive sales of our desktop product. But that first year, from like mid 2012 to mid 2013, we saw the rise of it, and we saw this global community take onto it. And at the time, there was only paid apps or free apps. There was no in-app purchases. We were top 5 grossing in the world in kind of every country on that. But then it was really the iPhone 4S that was like the unlock button for us. And that phone, if you remember, they doubled the megapixel size. It went from like a 4 megapixel to an 8 megapixel. They did not increase a lot of the memory around it, and it caused a lot of problems, if you will, from like these much larger files with the phone that couldn't handle them. And it was something that actually was an insight to me and to the team. Like, if Apple, who they think in decades, like this is like, they don't mess around. Like, they're not just like trying something for 6 months. If they expect someone to upgrade for a phone purely for a camera, and it was the first time they like marketed the camera, candidly, the quality was not there. The iPhone 4S was not really good. It wasn't until the iPhone 5 was the first like mobile photos where I was like, okay, we're onto something. Like, these are decent. And now looking back on it, it's comical because it's like the quality is amazing.
It's gotten so good, yeah.
It's better than my professional digital cameras at the time. But it was really that insight that like, they're going to pour everything into photos. We should really double down on mobile and really have this be all about mobile photography. Where you put your photos that aren't your portfolio, the work in progress, the things that you're trying. If I'm a portrait photographer, where do my landscape photos go or my travel photos go, because like my professional website was this super curated, only a specific subset of my photos. Where does everything else go to live?
Sure.
And so we built this, it was the VSCO grid. And we built this place for you to put those photos. And instantly we saw the freedom that it gave photographers and their passion for sharing to VSCO around the VSCO grid. If you think of something that shaped the VSCO community to what it is today, I think that moment, so it was really VSCO Cam 2, and it was really the grid component of it, because it was the first time you could share onto VSCO.
Sure.
Prior to that, everything was sharing off of VSCO. Right. And it's a big part of things, sharing everywhere,
Right.
but a special place for what you share on
VSCO. VSCO at that point became a destination for your content. It wasn't just a conduit for your
Exactly.
content.
Not just a tool.
Right.
And it went more from a feature to really an ecosystem, an experience, and a place where I think an important thing is something that people identify with. So if you want to know who I am, check out and I've always thought of like, if you can build a brand and build a company that lasts, it's something that you identify with. It says something about you that you are proud to tell others about.
Sure.
And that played a big part.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the guts of company building, because not everything, as we know, is rosy and perfectly up and to the right. But let's start with the moment you decided to raise money. So this skinny Indian kid who has a creative tools thesis begs you to go grab a beer at Prize Fighter in Emeryville.
You remember.
And he's exploring the opportunity of investing in this business, and he's telling you what he thinks. And at the same time, I'm sure you'd been pitched by a couple different venture firms at that point, because you guys obviously were top of the App Store in a bunch of different countries. You were a profitable business. You'd been bootstrapped for a long time. You had this great desktop business, and then you had this emerging mobile business. I think at the time you were probably around a couple 100,000 DAUs, and so that was significant back then. So you meet Accel, we meet. We're dancing around the idea of investing. What for you and the team, what was the moment that unlocked for you that, putting Accel aside for a second, that you wanted to raise VC, that you thought there was a venture scale business here and you needed the capital to go do that?
June 2013, we launched VSCO Grid, and it was the VSCO Cam 2.0. And at the time, we were allowing 1,000 people on to the platform to share their content. And we were seeing how much it cost us. We were running a profitable business, and it was kind of like, what is our expense? This was new. We had no idea. We'd operate for a month, see what it cost us, and then how many more people can we let in? So Thanksgiving 2013, we had a kind of, oh shit moment. And that moment was, it doesn't matter if we let in anyone else. The engagement of who we've already let in was increasing so rapidly, we were going to run out of money.
Yeah.
At the time, you're right. We had every venture capitalist under the sun had called. I will say something that really stands out, Prize Fighter was a test. I'll tell you the number of VCs that would not cross the bridge from San Francisco to Emeryville. Really? Oh, yeah. It's not an industry in which you want to call out, but there's so many names. Everyone would be like, well, here's our office and here's when so-and-so's able to meet with you. I was like, great. So I'm building a business. So I'm free from 4 to 5 o'clock. Here's the bar around the corner from our office, and great. And the number of people that just never took the meeting past that.
Yeah.
And so only
lesson learned, cross the bridge.
I had 3 kind of guiding principles. First, find investors that believe in your space and believe in what you're building. That are really passionate about it, not so much of even where it's at today, but really what it could be.
Right.
2, find investors that believe in you as individuals that are right for this space. And really the third thing is believe in you as the founders to execute that vision. And so most investors I talked to either did not see the space past where it was that day, and really what they were drawn to was the Instagram copycat.
Sure.
Instagram had just sold a few months prior for $1 billion.
Right.
What is the next.
What's the successor to Instagram?
What's the successor?
Now that it's been bought. Yeah.
Second, if they did believe in it and they believed in where it went, it was kind of met with the, all right, you'll get it to this stage and I have this other team, or we'll need new staff
We'll
to
bring
kind of
in a professional CEO to come run this company. Yeah.
And, I think meeting with you, I think really what set it off was you came in with the thesis for the space, and not to like pat you on the back.
Oh,
from
no,
that. Like,
Pat,
I actually
go for
think
it.
that vision is more relevant today than it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Which is, it's played out in a way, and I think we're entering into a space where I don't think as many people saw it back then, but now I actually believe the opportunity is even larger, and it's really come into fruition, and feel very fortunate to be in the position that we're in, kind of with the business that we have, to now go after this even bigger opportunity.
Did you and the team see the big multi-billion-dollar opportunity at the time? Or was it, hey, we need to raise some money because our costs are outstripping?
Both.
Yeah.
It was both. There's like a spectrum.
Yeah.
So I'm the eternal optimist looking at the biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
You have Zach on one end that's just like heads down, like tinkering, building things. And then you have Mike, Wayne, and Greg, and kind of like various degrees.
Sure. Different shades of conviction at the time.
I think we all had, and this is actually kind of an interesting insight that I learned a few years into VSCO, was the importance of alignment around what the definition of success is.
Sure.
Because I think what actually I realized at that point, I didn't know it at that moment, and I've now come to kind of realize we all had different definitions of success.
Interesting.
And we were not explicit with each other. And we got ahead of it. It didn't turn out to kind of be this like, poison pill, if you will, but it really almost came to that.
Yeah,
and I think that's like one of those things that like I now really, when I'm talking to kind of other founders, like you might think you're all aligned, but like you need to really get down and like talk about what success looks like. Because some founders, it's like, well, I just, I might have a certain number that I want to get to.
Sure.
I might have a certain stage that I want to get to. Or others might be like, I have this lifelong pursuit that I will never be satisfied.
Yeah.
Like I am going to like die
Right.
pursuing this like passion.
Yeah.
And I think,
and so walk us through, how did that manifest?
well,
What were...
it manifests itself in the risk that one's willing to take
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
in certain situations, or where to play it safe, or where to kind of go all in. And it starts to play the speed at which you feel, the urgency to run at something.
Yeah, who you're hiring, at what rate, what that implies about burn rate.
Pre-fundraising, we were, right at that moment, we were about 40 employees. We still had a daily stand-up with the entire company. Everyone knew what everyone was working on. And as far as alignment goes, it was really easy to stay as a unit. We were at the time Wayne was in New York, but it was Colorado Springs, Greg and all the curators and some of marketing. And then Mike and I leading the Emeryville office. And we more or less could like really stay connected, and everyone was kind of understanding where we were going.
Right.
We took fundraising. The company almost doubled in a year. We expanded each of the offices, built out New York office. So now it's like 3 offices. And I think that's where the definition of success, the clarity of, we knew where we were going, but like what that looked like or how far it needed to be pursued, the speed at which it needed to be pursued. I think we spent the next 2 years like trying to figure out how to work together. And that's where I remember, one of the more defining moments at the time, I did not want to hire anyone on the people function. I was like, just more engineers, product design, and I remember, I don't know if it was Excel or we're at the stage now, you need to hire HR people. And so I hired a woman by the name of Katie Shields, which looking back on it was one of the best decisions ever.
Oh my gosh.
And
One of the best people
and
CPOs out there.
And candidly, like, who shaped me personally as a human being, not just like a leader.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I went to Katie, I was like, all right, I want to fix these people. I want these people to perform different or like step up as a leader this way and that. And she's like, great. So we're going to start with you. And I was like, no. I'm not the problem. Like, and so we started with this like 360 review of me, which like was both one of the worst and best moments of my life.
Sure.
I remember like real moment being vulnerable here. I literally curled up in a ball on the floor at my house. And I was like, after getting all the feedback from everyone, and I was like, I was gutted.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife like told me, she's like, you know, do you know how lucky you are that people cared enough to share what they thought about you? Like, so, she's like, I don't have anyone like this that would give me this tough feedback. And it's like, be thankful that you had people. Like, now you know what to work on. You know where people need that. And that was really the moment where I realized a lack of alignment around expectations in a variety of roles. Expectations of where I wanted the business to go and what I was expecting of people, what they were expecting of me.
Yeah.
And so
So how did you create alignment from that? So that you got all this data, you saw the misalignment in, I don't know, ambition or outcomes, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so you have that now, you have to go create alignment.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, we fumbled for a little bit, to be honest, to like try and figure it out. We had hired a coach at the time, and I think those coaches that we had hired were great for conflict resolution, but not so much strategy building. But I ended up reading a book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, from Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group. And it really, like, if I were to think about VSCO today, like, I would say probably around 70-ish% of the structure is built off of the premise of what's outlined in the table in that book. Patrick has another book called The Advantage, which is more like a true like how-to book around building alignment around values and meeting structure, strategy. And so it was kind of like trial and error and putting things in place, but it really started with clarity of vision, where we were going, what success looked like. And then it was really around expectations. And I think one of the things that was a challenge for me was setting expectations that were from the focal point of what the business needed. And so much of what at the time, my job and what I felt my strength was taking an individual, looking at what they were strong at, and then utilizing those needs to make something out of it. But there was kind of this like turning point of like, this isn't personal. It's not about you, but what the business needs right now is this. And it's not saying that you're not capable or that, but like it's a different skill set or
maybe a different person.
And actually really was. And I think that was kind of like a shift in starting to be like, who are the right people for the moment in time to accomplish what we needed to get from where we were to where we wanted to go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so challenging for us when we are, our growth investing practice was really built around this archetype of company. It's the bootstrap founder that has identified a problem in the market. They've attacked it in a very efficient way. More often than not, they've gotten a profitability, but the company, maybe the revenue and the profits of the business have outscaled the team and its processes. And for that moment in time, that can be okay, based on the scale that you're at. But if you're Accel, and I remember this conversation at Prizefighter, we were dreaming about VSCO being this default, this standard in the market that every photographer would build upon. And that was a massive vision to go out and execute against that implied a level of scale that, as we now know, outstripped the capacity, the skill sets, and maybe even the intentions of the original team. And that tension point of getting from kind of scrappy, bootstrapped, everyone in one office, or at least, everyone a stone's throw away from one another, a high degree of trust and intimacy with one another. Everyone knew what each other was working on. Getting from that point to a structure that arguably is going to be much more scalable in service of that large vision, that is always a really tough transition point. And, there's no playbook for that. It is an imperfect art in some ways that requires a lot of, I think first and foremost, empathy for the team, because to your point, a lot of people signed up for this really awesome, scrappy, live within our means, profitable type business. And now Accel comes in and, we all have this shared vision for going really, really big. And maybe some people don't want to sign up for that. So you have to have a lot of empathy for the team. And then quite frankly, I think it's a lot of trial and error on the people side. I mean, I've been doing this 15 years. I can't think of a single company that has perfectly hired the right executive team out of the gate. No. We have gone through any number of iterations to find the right person for the right stage with the right skill set. Walk us through that transition of growing up from bootstrap business to now scalable, venture-backed company, specifically from a team building standpoint. Yeah. What are the lessons learned going from V1 to V6? What would you tell young Joel to watch out for as you're reinventing the org chart?
I mean, I think about this often. I would say definitely over the last couple of years, this is really the people side of it's become my passion. Yeah. It went from literally like the thing I saw almost no value in to like now I believe is everything. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter how great your vision is. If you can't build an organization that's effective, that executes well, that works together,
nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
And it really comes down, there's a few products or companies that it doesn't matter what happens on the people side. Like they caught lightning in a bottle, it's going to work. And I would say in a lot of ways, like that's also been the case with like VSCO. Like I look back at some of the ideas and the leaders that we had at VSCO, and they probably needed the VSCO today.
Sure.
To actually support them better. Sure. Now I'm like playing it back and it's like, they probably came in and are like, oh, great. Like, I didn't realize how much work I need to do here in order, this isn't, ready for where I'm at. And I do I look at people in their careers. David Brooks has this book, Second Mountain. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but looking at leaders that are at the stage of their career where they either have everything to prove for themselves. They're in this look at me and look at what I'm capable of doing, and I have something to prove. Or I've proven everything I need to prove. Mm-hmm. Look at what I have to give. Yeah. And I actually look at it from a team standpoint. You need both. Yeah. You can't have everyone being in this
chip on the shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone can't be chip on the shoulder stage. I have something to prove because they're fighting with each other on it. Can't have everyone in the I've been there and done that. And, I'm just here to help others because it loses the hunger and the fight. Yeah. It's the balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that balance is needed for different situations and different scenarios. But I do think it's critical to have enough of the leadership team that has nothing to prove. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that has really set Eric apart. Mm-hmm. And I think a few of the leaders that, Chris is another example with him on the team right now. And I think currently we have the best balance that we've had of that. I think that's one. And then two, it's really around kind of back to Patrick Lencioni's book and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I think we have always had, it's the leaders that are excellent in their field, but not always the leaders that understand the whole business and the enterprise leader. And one of the ways that in talking with other execs, I always say I will know you're successful when you're advocating for the resources of someone else in the business. Because what it tells me is that you understand what the business needs. Yeah. You're able to set yourself and function aside and realize that if, in fact, putting more money or people towards this other area will grow the business and is what the business needs. That's an unlock moment for me with an exec. When they are thinking back to not what they need or what marketing needs or what product needs or what design needs, what does VSCO need?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what does VSCO need to do in order to meet the needs of our customer?
Sure.
And that, I think, is kind of the most critical, like, altitude adjustment and language and creation. And I think is something where I didn't realize that early on. And it's easier said than done, like looking back on it. But I think it's something that is also like really critical, like understanding the needs of the business and how it works.
Yeah. Let's fast forward a bit to 2022, 2023. So VSCO has gone through its learning curve, its journey. You know, we're serving tens of millions of users. We have millions of subscribers. We have tens of millions of revenue. You know, we're not profitable. We're this, in some ways, we've come full circle. You know, we're this self-sustaining business, but we've never lost sight of our end vision of serving creators and helping creators be the best versions of themselves. And talk us through the psychology of, we've mentioned Eric, who is our now phenomenal, fantastic CEO. Talk us through the psychology of hiring Eric, the process of getting alignment between you and he on expectations, and then ultimately the process of handing over the keys to him.
So around 2018, 2019, I sat down and wrote this 10-year vision.
Yeah.
And I looked at it from a professional, family, and personal side of things. And at the time, 10 years, I knew where I wanted to be and where I wanted VSCO to be. I really wanted VSCO to always be something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, it needed to be weaned off of me. It needed to not be dependent upon me.
Yeah.
VSCO could not be attached to me as an identity. Some individuals and CEOs, like the business is the CEO,
person and vice versa.
and vice versa. But it was not what Greg and I ever aspired to.
Yeah.
We always aspired to have this generational business that was much larger and bigger than any of us individually. And it was about the community that we served. So working back on that, I worked with my coach to kind of create this 10-year plan. So it was really 5 years into this plan was to transition out as CEO and into exec chairman. Well, if I wanted to transition out as CEO in 5 years, I really wanted someone built up from within that was not just this like, hey, everyone, here's a new person that you've never met that's now going to run the business. And so then it was hiring a president or COO type individual to take over. Yeah. But again, we worked with the coach and we kind of created this 4-phase plan and back to clarity, definition of success. It was like, here's what success will look like in each of these phases. And Eric and I both did this whole analysis of like kind of a DAISY model of blind. So we each did it ourselves of everything that we thought in each of those phases we would own, be responsible for, be the decider on.
That's a great exercise.
And then it was kind of like we came together and looked at it, and there was, really only one area that we were, and it was kind of around the brand.
Okay.
And I think I maybe had some like hesitation of giving up decision making around that. But I think we came to a really healthy kind of resolution around that. Yeah. And so we kind of created this map, and it was like phases, and we knew what the outcomes would needed to be. And it was both ways. It was both what VSCO needed, but it was what Eric needed in order to be successful to kind of provide that air cover. And for Eric to be able to stand up in front of the company and for it to feel natural. And I think where it ended up with was everyone was like, well, yeah, this was clear to us. Like Eric's in this role. We want him, and it's not like it's like, good riddance, Joel, but it's
Sure.
kind of like it worked to near perfection that, the team, he really built that trust and leadership with everyone. And so, I mean, I look back on it and I think it takes two individuals. Eric had a vision for what he wanted for the future. And I think what was really critical for that, and it was one of the best pieces of advice. I know you gave it to me. Ryan Sweeney gave this to me, but it was really around finding a leader that wasn't just regurgitating my vision, but that they had their own vision of the future that built off of what Greg and I had built, but was bigger. It was new. It would excite me if to really have that person at the helm. And I think that's really where VSCO is today. It took this foundation that is phenomenal. You mentioned like it's a really great business, and I think Eric's made it even better. EBITDA positive the last 3 years, and just a really well-oiled machine. But this opportunity to kind of help photographers make it, in principle, Greg and I always talked about this. And if you were to ask us, it's what we wanted. But when you looked at the business, we had only accomplished parts of it. And I think now, today, and really especially, I mean, it's a really exciting year for a lot of the things that are coming, but everything that a photographer needs to make it as a photographer and as a creative, like VSCO's really focused on building. And so, it takes a lot of trust to hand something over. It's like, but I think it was like back to that. It's not about me or my identity. It's again, what's best for the business. What does VSCO need? It was very clear to me, like VSCO needed fresh leadership for the next decade. And I think this is like one of my lessons learned from executives in hiring. If you wait till it's too late, it's infinitely more disruptive. You always want to end on a high. And so one of the things that I consistently learned to start asking executives as I was hiring them is, what are you going to leave VSCO for? And people in the interview are like, what do you mean? What are you asking me what I'm going to leave for? And I'm like, no, seriously, like, what are your career goals? And it's like, Katie Shields is a great example. It's like, I want to be a chief people officer, a company going public, global, with thousands upon thousands of people. And I need to like scale that even more. And when that opportunity kind of arose, it was one where it was like, this is a success. Like, I feel like a success, like VSCO played a role.
Right.
And playing that, but it's like not holding back from that career trajectory. I take it as a challenge to grow VSCO and to grow the opportunity for that individual and that exec within VSCO. But if it's not be afraid of it, because I think that misalignment of expectations and desires and opportunity, no one wins in that. And ultimately the photographers that are paying us lose due to our inability to kind of like find that alignment.
I've been really impressed with how you've had to set aside in some ways your founding story and your identity as the leader of VSCO to do what's right for the company and its community long term. So tell us where we are going. I mean, we are in a really interesting point in time right now with Gen AI and what that means for creativity at large. It has pulled in so many new creators. I mean, people can now create at the speed at which they think. If you think about what a text prompt does and how it effectively encodes your own creativity, but then, generates something on the screen. What is VSCO's place in all of that going forward?
In one way, everything's changed, and in another, nothing has changed. It is one would have said the same thing from the way mobile photography disrupted professional photography. I mean, if you were to tell a professional photographer a decade ago that, newsrooms would not be hiring photographers and be relying upon people and their cell phone photos to be using for coverage, it'd tell you you're crazy. Or I remember like when the cover of Billboard magazine was of Justin Bieber, and it was shot on an iPhone. And it was like, man, if you would have told me as a professional photographer that like, I would have said, no way.
Yeah.
I think the tools and the technology are speeding up the ability for really the workflow and the process, but the need for the vision, the storytelling, really at the heart of what it, in my opinion, means to kind of be creative, is to look at a situation and come up with a solution that is not standard, or to see something in a way that no one else does.
Yeah.
One of my favorite photographers, Nirav Patel, I worked with him and we were shooting at this event. And afterwards I saw his photos and I was like, where was this?
Yeah.
I was like, we were in the same place and I never saw this. And he's like, well, I just saw it. And he literally can see the world in a way that I physically can't.
Yeah.
And I think the need for that for creatives and for storytellers will not go away. And in fact, as Gen AI and other things only enable others to and everything to kind of look the same, it's kind of replacing what stock photography was. Like,
Sure.
you could tell the stock photography that looked the same of people shaking hands in a high-rise conference room with glass. It was like, oh, that's just like a stock image,
Yeah.
not original or not creative. I think you'll see the same thing, and it might be different, and it's probably a lot harder to tell the difference now. Like, but I think what we'll see is that the need for creative storytelling is going to be needed in everything, not just photography, but I think for photographers in particular, like the need for community, the need for tools to run a business and be successful. All these things that I think are really big opportunities for us to tackle. And I think that default of VSCO is the home, the hub for photographers, the community, where they can learn their craft, where they can find mentorship, find support.
Yeah.
I think all of these are areas for us to build solutions and move beyond tools and move beyond community. And really, I think the big unlock is to make a living. And I think that's kind of like Greg and I would always say, like, I don't think we'd rest knowing that it was like that unfinished business.
Sure.
And I think it's something that like Eric has really latched onto. And I think we're just starting to see that opportunity of like the ways a photographer can make it on VSCO, find business, get paid, get their career started, go from just being an aspiring to an actual professional in that journey. I think what you will find is that for some, VSCO's played a role and in and out or been there, but we don't always like grow with the photographer in the past. I think what you'll see over the next decade will really be to find that like VSCO will be that like critical piece that I can't imagine life without.
Yeah.
And for those photographers, it will be like, they'll look back on it and say like, this was the critical tool, piece, community, support, encouragement, portfolio site. It's where I found my business. And so the more that we play into that, like I look back at the founding vision has a greater chance of success today. And I think the need's even greater. I think it's...
I totally agree with you. I think it has never been more important to feel the humanity and creativity than it is right now and going forward. And, you know, inspiration is a very human emotion. That, I think, is never going to be replaced by Gen AI. And that's the one thing when you look through VSCO users on Twitter or on Reddit that they continually come back to. It's this idea of humanity at the center of the creative spirit. And I think VSCO is going to play a really important role in capturing that sentiment and that spirit going forward. And so for me, I think Gen AI has created this immense opportunity to take on an even more important role in this ecosystem. And I couldn't be more excited for what the next 5-10 years hold.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you go back to the first product of VSCO with VSCO Film, that cut my editing time from 12 hours to 6 hours. I think what's most important, what I look forward to with AI is kind of this AI assistance, use human-centric AI assistance to, great, take it from 6 to 30 minutes. Give me back more time with family and friends. Give me more time to be out into the world to find inspiration and creativity and to explore and to create. And I think I'm all for, think about the time spent. I started in film, from film to the dark room, the span of the workflow improvements that have happened over the years. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I can get behind. The replacement, and it will be for some. There's always been some people are unwilling to pay for photos. They're scraping them off the internet. But for real storytelling and creativity and the importance of capturing a moment, I think there's real opportunity.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having us on the journey for the last 10 years and hopefully for many, many more years to come. It's been an honor.
It really has been a critical piece of it, and I'm excited for the future.